Hello and welcome to Star USA Training. Today is Tuesday, March 11, and we're digging into the general rules of interpretation. Whether you're joining us live or watching the recording back, we appreciate you being here. If you're attending live, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from today. You're also welcome to connect with us on LinkedIn. The session is being recorded. After the webinar, we'll upload the recording, slides, and additional materials to our website. If you registered for the webinar, you'll get an email with the link once all resources are available. If you're here for continuing education credits, welcome. We'll provide a CE code at the end of the webinar. This session qualifies for 1 CE credit for licensed customs brokers with customs, and anyone who has CCS or CES credentials can also get 1 credit through NCB FAA. Please be sure to save the code given at the end of the session, as we will no longer be sending them via email. It'll be in the chat because some of those letters and numbers can get confusing if you're transcribing from a slide. Stay on your toes today. There are a lot of polls through the webinar. Feel free to put any questions in the Q&A area. I may answer some throughout if they flow well, and stick around for a bit after to answer some questions as well. If you're not able to stick around, put your question in the Q&A anyway, and we'll answer it, and it'll be in the recording. I'm a licensed customs broker, but this is information only. It is not legal advice. I am not going to transact customs business on your behalf. This webinar assumes that you have some preliminary knowledge about HTS classification, but there's a lot you can pick up even if you're a total newbie. Consider this a level 200 course because it's digging more deeply into a certain element of classification. We have a level 100 webinar on classification linked at the end. It's a great refresher. If you're interested in learning even more about classification, we spend a couple of weeks on it in our broker prep course, and we also offer custom training where we get into how your specific products are classified. Please reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about any of this. My name's Jo Harper. I'm a principal with Star USA. My goal whenever I talk about trade compliance is to make tricky things simpler. I've heard from a lot of you that the GRIs make your head hurt. We provide international trade and compliance consulting, advice, training, and services across the whole spectrum. If it involves crossing borders, we've done it. Our teams are fantastic at helping set up processes for import and export, classification of goods, both for export and the HTS. I saw some people interested in ECCN classification, and we are not going to talk about that today. There are also many other things if your company is looking for help. If you want to learn more about us, we're at starusa.org. You can email hello@starusa.org. There are going to be a lot of polls today. They are anonymous, so do not feel weird about them. Let's see, I got to get to the first one. I always just like to know who's on the webinar and for you to know you're not alone. In case you can't tell so far, and everyone on here who's worked with me or taken the Customs Broker License Exam Prep course definitely knows this. One of the ways that I continue to enjoy my job is by personifying all of the repeat characters in my life. If you're lucky enough to work in compliance, GRIs should eventually become good pals. At this moment, they may seem overwhelming and complex, but I really hope by the end of this webinar to help you get familiar and be more comfortable enough with them by the end. Polls are anonymous, no judgment. You can scroll on the poll window when it pops up to reach the answer you're looking for. Some of these have long answers. You're not limited to the little that shows on your screen. All right, 3 more seconds and then I'll close it down, so get your answers in there. Beautiful. So it looks like there's a lot of good familiarity, at least passing acquaintance with them. That is wonderful. And I am glad that you're here, and we're going to get more familiar as we go. Even though this is a 200 class, it's still going to be A little high level, just because we only have an hour together. I could talk about each GRI individually for at least an hour, but I will not make you suffer through that today. Quick history. Here in the US, we use the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the US to classify goods. It's published every year by the US International Trade Commission. It's based on the WCO Harmonized System. The WCOHS is internationally used as a base for common trade. Our HTS US, even though it's published annually, it usually has many updates each year. There have been 5 in the last few weeks alone as it handles tariff back and forth. The WCOHS is only updated every 5 years. The next one is 2027, so get ready. It's a triennial report year and a new HS year. Here's what the WCOHS provides and what it allows countries to add for their own edition. Note that we get to add 1 GRI. Keep that in mind for 2 slides from now. The explanatory notes are a companion to the WCOHS that they publish. They are not legally binding, and you can't always use them to prove your point with US Customs, but they are extremely helpful in starting to get there. Since the ENs are international, they won't help you past the first 6 digits, and they don't say anything about the additional US GRI. They also don't govern or help with classification in chapters 98 or 99, because those are US-specific chapters. If you classify often, especially if you classify tricky things, I recommend a subscription to the ENs. GRIs apply to the HTS Schedule A that's used to classify imports and the Schedule B of the HTS US that's used to classify exports. This is good knowledge no matter who you are. They also apply internationally, so you can use them in disputes with your buddies in other countries, except for the US additional GRI. Do you see what I see about that US GRI? It sure looks like 4 of them to me. We had a question, if the recording is provided afterwards, it will be. You will get an email sent out with the recording. EN subscriptions tend to be per person. Sometimes I share EN information about a specific heading with someone that I'm working with, and I feel okay doing that. All right, first up is GRI 1. GRI 1 is the most common GRI, and people often mistake GRI 1 items for being classified according to a different GRI because of the second part. Few parts in this GRI wording that I want to specifically call out. The first one is that some elements of the HTS are provided just to help you out. You cannot base a classification argument on the title of a chapter. Legally, you classify based on the words in the headings, that text that's next to the 4-digit, and the section or chapter notes, as long as the headings and notes don't contradict it. Then you can use the other GRIs. Often you're classifying using the notes, and we think it's a different GRI. But GRI 1 covers a whole lot of things. Some paraphrased high points from the explanatory notes for GRI 1. Sometimes titles can't be specific or lengthy enough to include everything. That doesn't mean that items belong or don't belong in that chapter. Sometimes chapter notes might say that you can only include certain items in a heading. For example, Chapter 31, Note 2 on heading 3102. And that means you can't use other GRIs to expand that heading. This is a July 2024 ruling that Customs Headquarters did. BIC was importing felt tip markers that are used for temporary tattoos. Customs looked at 2 options, one as beauty preparations for skin, the other as markers. What do you think? How should they be classified? We're pretty close on this. I'll give you about 5 more seconds, and then I'll tell you what everybody thinks. So we're almost 50-50, leaning toward 3304 as a beauty preparation. Custom says they're classified in 9608 as markers. This ruling was a review of a New York ruling. In case you're not as deep into the nerd weeds as we are, rulings get submitted to the New York specialists for most classification items, and you'll know that they ruled it if it starts with an N or an NY. If it's a review, it automatically goes up to headquarters. And you know that headquarters did it because it'll either start with an H or an HQ. New York said they go in 9608. BIC argued and said, no, we think they should go in 3304. They're more than just art markers that kids buy from Crayola. But CBP said, in accordance with GRI 1, heading 3304 is not the right heading because the terms of the heading do not specifically provide for felt-tipped markers for temporary tattoos. And 9608 provides for felt-tipped markers. That's more useful than just things for beauty. Now we're on GRI 2. This GRI is in 2 parts. The first part expands the scope of the heading to include a reference to incomplete or unfinished articles, as long as that heading describes the essential character of the finished article. It also includes unassembled items. In my brain, this is the IKEA rule. This is where we first introduced the concept of essential character in the GRIs, but it won't be the last that we talk about it. The second part says that headings also include mixtures or combinations of a material with other materials. Then it goes on to say that the way that you choose which of the materials the item is classified as is by using GRI 3, a bit of an evasion, I would say. Okay, great. This GRI is what we use when there isn't a heading that exactly describes our item. It makes the headings more inclusive or more expansive. We're going to talk about the explanatory notes. They separate 2A into 2 parts, incomplete or unfinished, and unassembled or disassembled. Remember that the essential character they're talking about here has to be at the time of classification. You classify items at the time that they're imported or exported, not after they've been processed in the US, except for some odd use cases like an FTZ. The ENs for GRI 2A introduce the concept of a blank. It has to meet the requirements that are here on the slide. Not ready for consumer use, has the approximate shape of the finished article, and cannot be used for anything other than the finished article, except in exceptional cases. An example of a blank is a plastic bottle preform. It comes in a tube, there's one closed end and one end threaded for a screw cap. It's intended to be expanded into a specific shape and size after it's imported. That's a blank. I am not swearing in this webinar. Semi-manufactured items like a bar or a tube are not blanks. Those are semi-manufactured, not incomplete. Headings can be expanded to include blanks unless blanks have their own specific heading, in which case you're classifying using GRI 1, not GRI 2. The ENs add a cool note here that says that because sections 1 through 6 are so specific, 2A for essential character doesn't usually apply. Cows are classified in section 1. They're either cows or not. There isn't really essential character of a cow or an incomplete cow. Things like steaks have their own headings, and then that would be GRI 1. Unassembled or disassembled is the second part of 2A. The ENs remind us that when goods are presented unassembled, it's usually for ease of transport. Think about that IKEA bookcase you bought. It's much easier to transport in those flat pack boxes than when it's fully put together. The goods also can't need to have anything done to them after import that's manufacturing. It can only be assembly like screws, nuts, bolts, or rivets. They don't have to be simple assembly operations, but the operations you do after import can only be assembly if you're using GRI 2A to classify. If the bookshelf only holds 5 shelves once it's put together, and they pack 6 in a box in case one breaks, that 6th shelf has to be classified separately. Extra parts have to be classified separately. 2B is for mixtures and combinations. If the heading already provides for mixtures, for example, my example on here is if it tells you you can't use mixtures. If the heading provides for mixtures, then you're using GRI 1, not GRI 2. If a combination or mixture changes so that the good does not exemplify the heading anymore, you cannot use that heading. This ruling that we're going to talk about is from the New York Commodity Division. You can tell because it says N at the beginning, and it goes over the unfinished part of GRI 2A. The goods are going to be slitting knives, which will go in a machine that processes corrugated cardboard. As imported, the items are steel in a thin disc with a set outside diameter and 8 mounting holes. After they're imported, the manufacturer will ream the inside diameter, grind the sides, and bevel and sharpen the outside. They looked at 2 headings, 8208 for knives and cutting blades for machines, and 8441 as parts of paperboard machinery. And I'm going to let you decide how you would classify these articles. All right, 5 more seconds and we'll wrap it up. Some of you got in just under the wire. Way to go. We're leaning toward 8208. We're almost 50% on 8208. Some of us think neither of these adequately provide for it. Customs says 8208 is where the steel items go. Congratulations. Half of us were right. Even though there's some processing after the import, these items are easily recognizable as what they will be, and they cannot practically be used for anything else. They're unfinished articles with the essential character of complete blades for machines. If you want to get a handle on the way Customs is thinking about classification or other elements, read the HQ rulings. Those ones usually go into their logic pretty well, while the New York rulings don't have such a roadmap. This ruling is pretty cool because it goes into a lot of depth about whether this specific transaction is subject to GRI 2A or 3B. I didn't get into that here because we haven't talked about GRI 3 yet, but I recommend you read through it after the webinar when you have more of that knowledge under your belt. In this situation, a company is importing items that they're going to package together and sell as a kit to their customers. It has a handset for a cell phone, the battery, the cover, a charger, and instruction manuals. These are coming in as pallets of each item packed in their own boxes, but in the same quantities of each, 1,000 handsets, 1,000 batteries, 1,000 covers, and so on. So they can be made into kits without anything left over or anything short. The original ruling said it was a disassembled set. Customs said, that's not right. GRI 2A applies to some of these individual articles. A prior ruling said that some of the elements could be combined into a disassembled phone. What do you think? Should they be classified all together as a cell phone, all separately in their own individual headings, or with some of the items classified as a cell phone and some of the items classified individually? All right, just a few more seconds. The way you vote on these is a poll window should pop up in your Zoom, and then you can click and vote, and that should work. All right, let's see. We are very evenly split. About 30 on both of the first two and 35% on the last one. We're leaning slightly toward the last one. And Customs said the last option is correct. You can combine the handset, the cover, and the battery into a phone. Then the charger and the manuals are separate. We can't really talk about GRI 2B without going into GRI 3 because it says you have to use GRI 3 to decide which of the potential headings you're going to use for a mixture or a combination. There we go. GRI 3 is where we go when we need to figure out which heading to choose. Here's the wording of GRI 3. Note that it starts with shouting out GRI 2B as a lead-in and says it's for deciding between two or more headings that on the face of it are able to hold your goods. You have to do it in order, and that order is most specific description, essential character, and last numerically. 3B also talks about sets for retail sale. GRI 3 is hierarchical. You cannot move to B without failing A. You can only use GRI 3 if GRI 1, headings or notes, don't tell you otherwise. The ENs say that you can't have a hard and fast rule for what's most specific. That would be too easy. But usually something that's named is more specific than a class of goods. If you have a hair clipper, it should be classified in 8510 as a hair clipper, not 8509 as a domestic appliance with self-contained electric motor, or 8467 as tools for working in the hand with a self-contained electric motor. Another example of a more clear description is a textile mat for a car being classified in 5703 as a carpet instead of in 8708 as a motor vehicle accessory. Carpet is more explicit. Motor vehicle accessory can be a whole lot of things. The item here is a scarf hanger made out of metal. It's a hanging rack with a hook. That rack holds wire bars that are used to hold and store scarves. CBP considered 7326 as article of iron or steel and 8302 as base metal mounting or fitting like a hat rack or a hat peg or similar articles. What would you choose using GRI 3A? All right, 3 more seconds. You're getting pretty fast here. So overwhelmingly, 80% voted for 8302. Custom says you are correct. There's a lot of things that can fit into 7326, and an item holding scarves fits best in base metal items for holding outside accessories, similar items to a hat rack. Great work. 3B talks about essential character, which is a nebulous concept and is decided by many different factors. Could be the nature of the item, bulk, quantity, weight, or value, or how it's related to the use of the good. Composite goods might be attached permanently, like a flashlight radio in the same housing, or they might be able to be separated as long as they're usually sold together, like a wooden spice rack and the empty spice jars that are made of glass and have metal lids. That's a composite good because it's not all wood, not all glass, and not all metal. Sets for retail sale are fun. They must have 2 or more goods classified in different headings in the HTS. You cannot classify 6 forks as a set since they all have the same heading. They also must meet a specific need or activity and be packaged to go directly to the retail user without repackaging. A sandwich made of beef in a bun that's classified in 1602 and packed with a bag of potato chips that's classified in 2004 can be a set. There's 2 different headings, they're for eating together, and they're packed as one meal. Remember that even if you're able to classify it as a set, you still need to know the headings and value of each of the components because they have to be reported when you make an entry. We have a ruling for an art kit / toy. It includes a projector, a lens, 6 markers, and 10 discs that are used to draw graphic designs, and then the projector projects a still image on the wall or the ceiling. Is it classified as plastic discs, monitors, a still image projector, or the markers? Call back to our tattoo markers. Think about the essential character and what factors you might use. You're welcome to throw the factors that you chose into chat after you vote. One use of this is to draw like a tic-tac-toe board and then project it up onto a wall. All right. 2 more seconds, get your votes in. So you can see we're leaning strongly toward the projector. 80% of us said projector. The next highest were the markers. Customs also said the projector. It makes sense as being the unique element to an art set. Most art sets do not come with a projector. And it's also likely the largest single item and probably the most expensive element. Since none of the headings that we were given provided for every bit of the good, we can't use GRI 3A, and we go with essential character to select 9008 as a still projector. Can this item be classified as a set? It has a flask, a shot glass, and a metal funnel, all packed in a wooden box that's shaped specifically for those goods. This is definitely one of those polls that you're going to want to scroll. You could have, nope, there aren't enough heading options, so you can't use a set provision. No, the items don't meet a particular activity. They aren't packed together for retail sale. Or yes, you're going to classify it as the shot glass. Yes, you would classify as the flask. Yes, you would classify as the wooden box. Or yeah, it can be a set and the funnel is the essential character. So this is really a two-parter. Oh, we had somebody using a factor jumping ahead, talking about 3C. All right, I'm going to give you 4 more seconds to make up your minds. Okay, we are split. 22% said it's the flask, 22% said it's the shot glass, 21% says they're not packaged together for retail sale. So about 50% say it doesn't meet the set requirements, and 50% say it does. Just a little more than 50%. Custom said it can be classified as a set and that the flask is the essential character. It's classified in 7326. Because this is a New York ruling, they don't specify whether the essential character is because of function or value or mass. They just say that is the essential character. So you can make up your own mind as to why the flask is the most important element of that set. And guess what? 3C doesn't really need much explanation, so the ENs are very, very short. Last numeric heading is pretty easy, but you do have to make sure that the headings you're choosing between deserve equal consideration. And a lot of the time we confuse 3C items. We think items are 3C and they're actually GRI 1. For example, when you're classifying textiles, mixtures of textiles, and they are equivalent weights, you classify in the last numeric heading. That's note 2 from section 11, notes for textiles. Here we have a ruling for a combination good, which is usually directed by GRI 2B, which then tells us to move on to GRI 3. This is polyfoam covered with fabric and feathers, has a base metal wire in the bird. Here, base metal wire refers to a wire made of base metal, not the metal wire being in the base. I'll give you a hint. Customs said these provisions are equally specific and that there's more than one heading that provides for the essential character of the item. How do you think this bird should be classified? I will warn you, this is a trick question. I gave you just a few more seconds to vote. All right. Again, pretty even split. 27% of us say feathers, 27% of us say the wire, 25% say it's the foam that makes up the core of the bird. I can see the logic in that because it's probably the largest mass. Customs said, heading 6701 because it's the heading that comes last numerically among those that merit equal consideration. So even though 72 had wire and it's later than 6701, Customs found the textile and the feathers were equally essential to the bird, and feathers come later than the textile. That one made me mad. All right, so GRI 4 is your friend. If there's no heading, you can find. If you can't classify goods using GRIs 1 through 3, you classify them under the heading that provides for goods that they're most akin to. The explanatory notes say you have to compare the imported goods with a variety of similar goods to figure out which ones they're most akin, and kinship depends on factors like description, character, purpose, but it could be other factors as well. Let's look at an example. This is for the sea bob, which frankly terrifies me. It pulls you at the surface of the water or under it, powered by a lithium-ion battery. It's pretty light. You don't have to be licensed to use it. Is it a boat or is it equipment for outdoor sports? How do you classify it? And then tell me in chat if you would use one. I think most of my nerves about it come from the fact that you have to be in a really big body of water to use it. You wouldn't use it in your backyard pool. And that means you can't see the bottom probably, and there are creatures. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Is it a boat or is it an outdoor sports item? 57% say 9506. I gave you the wrong, I had a typo. It should be 9506, not 9508. If you didn't select 9508 because it doesn't exist in the HTS, good job, you. CBP says it is most like a boat, and we had someone in chat say the same thing. I have one of these. It's like a boat. Chapter 95 notes kick out sports crafts. So 9506 isn't the only provision for sporty things. And because this is an item that goes in the water and propels a human, it's most like goods in Chapter 89. Some of these GRI 4 rulings get pretty intense. The WCO rulings using it are really fun to read, and often they result in new HTS provisions being added. Because if you need to classify something that doesn't have a provision, you take it to the WCO so that they can add one. GRI 5, we're not talking about items anymore. We're talking about the goods that carry or package items. It has two parts. A covers cases that are for long-term use and specifically shaped for their goods. Shout out to our wooden box from our flask set. If you have those and they come with the articles, you classify them with the articles. If they're not packed with the articles, then they're classified as their own thing. B provides for packing materials and packaging as long as it's not for reuse. If they're not for reuse and presented with the goods, they're classified with the goods. If they're reusable or they come in solo, then they're classified as their own thing. The ENs break 5 into 2 parts. We're going to talk about them before we give examples. This first bit is specifically for 5A. These give 5 elements that allow goods to fit into 5A. They have to be shaped for the item. They need to be suitable for long-term use, storage, or travel. They need to be imported with the item. They're normally sold with the articles, and they aren't so fancy or valuable that they give the essential character of the import and take it away from the goods. Let's look at a laptop sleeve. It has an outer surface of man-made textile, only one interior storage compartment, and that is shaped for the computer it's meant to hold, secured by a magnetic flap closure, substantially constructed, and clearly designed to be used repeatedly to protect a laptop. CBP looked at 4202 as a bag and 8471 as a laptop, classified with the goods. What do you think? How should these be classified? I had a question about more examples for retail sets. I have a million of them, but I had to pick just one so that we could get through the rest of the GRIs in a timely manner. If you want to email me for more, you're welcome to. And you can also go into CROSS, the Customs Ruling Online Search System, and search GRI 3B, and you will get a ton of information. It's really cool. You can actually go into CROSS and search any of the GRIs. There's also an informed compliance publication on sets and kits. And if you deal with sets a lot, I would really recommend it. When you are working with sets, when you do an entry, the item that provides the essential character is entered with the HTS prefix X, and that's where the duty is assessed. That's the benefit to using a set classification, is that you get to import the items at one duty rate instead of having duty assessed for each of the articles at different rates. All right, let's end this and share the results. You voted overwhelmingly, 65%, that it would be classified as 4202 when imported alone, classified as the case when imported alone, and classified as the laptop when imported with the laptop. Well done. Very few of you fell for the trick of 4202 when imported with the laptop. That was a mean trick. I felt like I was making it too easy. Custom said 4202 when imported alone, 8471 with the laptop. Makes entry simpler because you only need one line for the laptop with the case. GRI 5B doesn't need you to separate out the packaging. The value of the packaging is just combined in with the value of the item it carries, and it's one line. We can use GRI 5A because it's suitable for reuse, sized with the laptop, so we're set. GRI 5B provides for packing materials that are not reusable and that are not subject to 5A. If goods can be used under 5A, use that. We have some smart labels. Those labels can be printed with data like the address and also have the bill of lading information encoded in it to be read by a Bluetooth reader. They come in recorded. You cannot re-record it or overwrite the data. They are adhesive. You put them on your package, import the package, and then you throw it away with the package. Are these eligible for GRI 5B? What do you think? There's a really good point in here about if you're using cross, try to get multiple rulings about the same item because often you'll come across disagreements or they'll spell out which factors make the heading chosen the best heading. So you want to really carefully read it. You can't just see that you're classifying a fan and there's a ruling for a fan. You want to know, do the specifications of your fan match that fan? Some rulings are also revoked or modified. It's just a really good place to try to get an overview and idea. Okay, most of you say yes, these can be GRI 5B. About 30% say no. Customs said, yes, these can be used under GRI 5B, classified with the goods when they're imported with the goods that they're intended for. Because the labels cannot be overwritten, cannot have new data added, and they get thrown away, then they're not for repetitive use. They're part of packing materials. Here's our last international GRI. It says that when you're classifying in a subheading, you only compare subheadings at the same level. You also use the GRIs that you used to select a heading to select the right subheading. And do not forget about the notes. The ENs for this GRI tell us what same level means. In the US, it's how indented items are. You can only compare at the same indentation. International HS has dashes, which are way easier to see because you can see, is this a 1- indentation or is this a 2- level? And you compare at those levels. Notes can also be different for subheadings than for headings. For example, Chapter 71 Platinum definition differs from the subheading note definition for platinum. If you're looking at the subheading, if you've already selected the heading, then you want to use the subheading notes. Notice here how these are all at the same level of indentation, but some of the items at the same level of indentation have 8-digit subheadings and others only have 6. Don't compare at number to number level, compare at indentation level. I want to talk about this for a lot longer. We only have an hour together and more to cover. So if you have questions about indentations or which to compare as you're classifying, please feel free to email me. We have a really cool or warm mattress pad. It's set up so one side is cotton and the other side is Sherpa fleece from polyester. It's filled with microfill. GRI 1 puts the good in 9404. So we have the heading. Now we need to choose a subheading and we go with what the previous GRIs were. Section 11 notes say that when you're classifying a textile item that's a mixture and they're equal mixtures, you go with last numerically. GRI 1 places the good in 9404. Section 11 doesn't cover Chapter 94. So, what subheading should CBP use? All right, couple more seconds. Most of you chose 9622 as outer shell of man-made fibers. That is what customs said. It's an item with an outer shell of polyester. It wasn't chosen because the fleece is thicker than the cotton, but because polyester, it comes after cotton among the classifications that we were considering. So we used GRI 3C sort of at this level. There are no ENs for the additional US GRI because ENs are international and these are US. I broke the GRI into its 4 separate parts. We'll talk about each part before an example. 1A says that a classification controlled by use that is not an actual use provision is decided by the way that we use goods in the US at the time the goods are imported. This is the principal use rule. An importer was bringing in several butcher block style tops that they're going to use in their co-working spaces as desks. The wooden tops have holes cut in them for cord management. They're cut down to specific sizes that fit for desks. Customs looked at 9403.30 for office furniture and 9403.60 as other wooden furniture. How do you think these should be classified? Think about butcher blocks and where butcher block elements are often used. Okay, 3 more seconds. Most 67% say as other furniture. Customs agreed. This was a ruling where the New York specialist said it goes in 9403.60. The customers asked headquarters to overrule them, but headquarters agreed. They said 9403.30 is a principal use provision because the heading has the words of a kind in it. In US versus carborundum court case, the court put together a list of factors to figure out if an item is in a particular class of merchandise. That list gets referred to regularly in court cases and customs rulings, so it's a good one to know. Those factors are, paraphrased, general physical characteristics, where it's sold, what the end buyer expects, how it's marketed, if it's used that way, whether that use is normal and cost-effective, and how trade recognizes the use. Just using a butcher block top in an office doesn't mean that all of them are used that way. Could go office, kitchen, bedroom, or it could go everywhere. Additional US GRI 1B says if you import a good under an actual use provision, you can only do that if you mean to use the goods that way when you import them. The goods are used that way, and proof of use is provided within 3 years of import. We talked about principal use headings. Now we're at actual use. This is a greenhouse. It's imported, knocked down. Thank you, GRI 2. Made of aluminum frame with plastic wall and roof panels. CBP describes it as sturdily constructed, which is a subjective description, but helps you picture it a bit more. They were imported in mass by a garden store to be sold to their customers. There was a 1990 ruling that put together a 3-part test for using 9817-005000, which is machinery, equipment, and implements for ag or horticultural purposes. They can't be on the list of exclusions. The terms of GRI 1 must be met, and it must meet actual use conditions. Customs knows that it goes in 9406, but can it use 9817? I lost my polls. Let me bring them back up. Can we use it? Yes, no matter what. No, you cannot use 9817. Yes, as long as you provide documents from customers proving they were used from horticulture, or yes, you can make a blanket cert saying they'll be used for horticulture. We're going to do this one fast. Most 46% say yes if the importer makes a blanket cert. Customs says yes, you use 9406 and you're allowed to use 9817. 9406 is not a part of exclusions, so we meet the first part. Then we haven't talked about informed compliance publications yet. They are a thing of beauty for guiding the trade in how CBP considers certain elements. Definition of horticulture: a greenhouse is used for horticulture by its nature. And then for proving actual use, Customs says 9817 declares your intention. And if you use that, the port director can accept that as proof of use. And the importer can just give a blanket cert as long as they promise to tell Customs about any other actual use if they find out about it. You might want to use 9817 because it lets you import duty-free as opposed to the 9406 duty rate, which is 2.9%. This is the GRI, the US GRI, that I most often need to remind people of. Some of you are on this webinar. Hi, friends. It says that a heading that specifically describes a part is preferred to one that just provides for parts of or parts and accessories of. We have a furniture company importing glass mirrors that are framed with wood. They have steel bars attached to the back, lets them connect to dressers and chests. Those furniture items are designed to be used in the bedroom. Importers asking the HTS when the mirrors are imported alone and when they're attached to the furniture. Are they? 700992 is mirrors always furniture parts, always bedroom furniture, or mirrors when alone, bedroom furniture when with the dresser, furniture parts when alone, and bedroom furniture when with the dresser. You can find informed compliance publications by looking up informed compliance publications. They're on Customs website, sorted into categories. There are a ton of them on a variety of different topics. When you're classifying, start with the international GRIs and then move into the US GRIs. But the international GRIs always apply. The US GRIs are supplemental to those. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. 78% say it's the mirror when alone and bedroom furniture when with the dresser. Customs agrees. You are correct. Provision for the mirror comes over the provision of parts of furniture and classified with the furniture when imported together. Congratulations. Our last part. GRI 1D says when you're classifying textile items, you use Section 11 provisions no matter if the items are in that section or not. Quilt, it's 52 inches square, has a sleeve allowing it to be hung. The dictionary tells us a quilt is a bed covering consisting of 2 layers of fabric stitched together, usually in a decorative pattern. Is this other furnishings or a quilt? What do you think? Is it a cotton quilt or a man-made fiber quilt? You may recognize some of these from exams. Customs broker license exams often include questions that have been recent rulings, so that's fun. All right, I'm going to end this one and share. Most of you lean toward a man-made fiber quilt. This was so mean. I put a non-GRI 1D in here. It was a trick. I will tell you that when CBP first classified it, they classified it according to GRI 1D, put it in 9404, 90, 90, 20. They did not think about whether it was bedding or not. This is a headquarters ruling that corrects that original. And in this ruling, Customs really goes into whether or not it's bedding. They said it cannot be. It doesn't fit any standard mattress sizes. And even though the HTS and ENs don't specify that it has to be items for bedding, it's implied in a few ways. Just having a sleeve for hanging doesn't make it not a quilt. Some quilters put those on to display. All right, here's our last poll. There's no right answer to this one, but if you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine. The code for the webinar is in chat, so you can grab it if you have to hop off. Thank you for joining today. We do have a little more, but I just want to know what you think. You might think this is evidence that I am personifying, but I don't tell human beings that they're my favorite. If you want to throw in chat why you like yours, I always love to know that. Mine is GRI 3C, because when we're dealing with really complex and subjective elements, like, is this of sturdy construction? I love a clear-cut answer. I love that it's just like, yes, last numerically. Okay, we're going to wrap up. Close second is 1C, because it tells us how to handle parts. So most of you chose GRI 1. That's great. It should be wonderful. I love it too. Classifying is hard, but you are not alone. The reason we're digging into the GRIs is so you can use them when you're documenting your classification rationale. Do that for your future self. Once you've classified 1 million items, you will not remember what you were thinking when you classified number 1,567. Put which GRI you used in a record somehow and save yourself many headaches. The website materials will contain a worksheet that's a great example of which elements to include in a classification document. Don't hesitate to ask an expert or get a customs ruling. We clearly used a bunch of customs rulings. There are webinars linked here that might be helpful, including a few on HTS classification. Code for the webinar is in chat. Remember, if you're using the code for your LCB CEs, you don't need to submit it anywhere. Just hold on to it for your records. Next month is Incoterms Rules with Michael. It'll be a lot of fun. And feel free to stick around for questions. Thank you again for joining today. Yes, we will give a copy of the recording, and you can be refreshed whenever you want. If you have questions, I know we went through them really quickly and only gave one example per. Again, feel free to email us. We're hello@starusa.org. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.